20, 30 years ago, it was thought that the automobiles are taking about 60% of the fuel, liquid fuel is being used up in automobiles. So what should be done? Yes, we should have more efficient engines, isn't it? So we have developed higher and higher efficiency engines, smaller cars, so that you can get fuel consumption can be reduced. That's what it seems evidently. But what happened actually? In this level of thinking, by getting cars smaller and having high fuel efficient engines, fuel consumption should have come down. But it didn't happen, actually went up. Why? Because social factors came in, cars being smaller, cheaper, more people were able to buy it, more cars came. So it's a hard fact in India and throughout the world that as the efficiency of the car engines increased and people started going in for smaller cars, the number of cars went up, and actually the fuel consumption was more than what it was earlier when the cars are inefficient and we had only Lambretta and Ambassador and whatever we have in India. The reason was that that level of thinking thought that fuel consumption is a problem, and therefore if you reduce specific fuel consumption, it should happen. But problem is more complex than that. It's not just a fuel consumption problem. It is related to the human dimension of it, the utility factor, and the human aspirations, and the issue of transportation, and so many other things are coupled to it. So that's a very simple way of understanding that if the problem is seen in a very limited perspective, quite often the solutions will be counterintuitive, counterproductive. Now there's a problem, for example, that there are slums in the cities. It has also been very well studied. So in many cities where there are a lot of slums, they try to remove the slums by making more small houses, good houses for them, small houses. And the result was that cities become more kind of attractive to the people from villages. So the migration from villages increased. And so eventually the slums increased. So though it seems very strange to say, the making of more houses to reduce the problem of slums actually increase the problem of slums, because you're thinking at the same level at which the problem is caused. This has been verified so many times. There's a study available in England, for example, that they were probably one of the earliest to switch over to these high efficiency electric lamps. These sodium lamps and other lamps which have very high efficiency and energy consumption is less. They give much higher lumens per watt than any of the bulbs. So they shifted to that in the public lighting and street lighting everywhere, so those yellow lights. So the idea was that it will therefore reduce down the electric consumption. But then soon people found that why should we have poles lighting so low intensity lighting? So let's increase the lighting intensity so that we can see things better now that the lamps are more efficient. So again, the result of introducing high efficiency lamps eventually was, in the long run, that the electrical consumption in the lighting increased. So these are the things which are counterintuitive, and that's what I think Einstein is mentioning in this problem, that if you continue to look at the problem within that limited domain and don't look at an overall holistic paradigm of this problem, then you can come to a wrong solution. That's the way I understand it. Okay, does it make sense?
Yeah.
Good, so let's move further. So let's start a bit of a recollection of this and understanding what does it mean. So Raman, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. See, the key point on this slide is that ironically this process of trying to move in the right direction sometimes can lead you in the opposite direction. And this irony exists because we tend to believe that there is this part of me which needs to be corrected and controlled and taken in the right direction. This is the path. This is the part of me which gets distracted, which gets into endless thoughts, which gets agitated, falls to greed and anger and temptation, and that I, the good part, need to somehow control it, correct it through meditation, through other efforts. And what happens in this process is this concept of I actually gets reinforced because you are starting to reduce yourself into two parts, a part that needs improvement and this other good part of you which needs to do that correction and controlling. So I think the key message from what I recall and what I can understand after reading this slide is that one needs to be very careful that in this process you do not lose sight of anatta or the fact that there is no self. And by sort of falling into this trap of by doing things, I am correcting this bad part, you may be actually reinforcing the I of the self. So we need to be very cautious. And this is where we had that discussion of if we don't start with that motivation, then how do we even start? So that's probably more discussion that will follow. But that's what I recall from this line.
Good. Anything you would like to add, Deepak or Akhilesh? Anybody?
So, the way I understand is when we do meditation, and even during meditation, the thing probably which needs to come out is that the five khandas are not I. So, we can start with meditation, which will improve the concentration and which will improve the determination to start with. But once we have some control or some determination, so we need to try to see that the body is not self, feelings are not self, perception is not self. We're able to see our attachments to them and to be able to see that this is not I. That will probably lead to the right meditation. And if we don't see non-self in the mind khanda, we will probably not move in the right direction.
Good.
Sir, I have a question. So, in case of the beginning of the practice, let us say in the 10-day course or even otherwise, it seems that if we don't bring the understanding of anatta in the beginning itself, we will almost go in the opposite direction inevitably. It seems very hard to understand how, if this is true, when you begin, you will not end up reinforcing the I. That's something that I am not able to understand.
Yeah, that's true. I think this, of course, within personally we have discussed this issue, but I think we can easily see that as the book progresses, and I'm sure Rajesh will bring it out, that one has to start with that I of ourselves, because you can't by theoretical understanding one cannot give it up. But if there is no theoretical understanding whatsoever of this, one can end up spending life, decades, and ending up increasing the ego. So there is a kind of paradox involved in the whole process. which is in fact inbuilt in the teaching, in the very first teaching of Four Noble Truths, as I have been mentioning. There is an inherent paradox in the Four Noble Truths itself. But one should be aware of it. The trouble is that if we are not aware of it, then we can be really caught in the ego trip to a very great extent. If we are aware of it, then the possibility of getting caught is drastically reduced. And I can see it from my own experience, and I think from the experience of a large number of meditators, that if you are not aware of it, of course, this is a very important thing. Anatta is the core of the teachings, because from there everything else follows. But this also is true, Akhilesh, as you said, that it's so difficult to understand in the beginning. It's absolutely counterintuitive. No? If body and mind are not I, then what is I, and who is working, and who is suffering, and who is wanting to get out of suffering? So one has to really start with the understanding that I am suffering, and therefore I want to get out of suffering, so that I who wants to get out of suffering is there definitely. But as one investigates properly, one has to understand that this whole notion of I itself is the root cause of suffering. That should be brought out in the whole paradigm. Maybe it may not be possible to come to do it in the very first course for newcomers. If they do, then obviously it will be quite tough, as I can see it. But if people who come and who have been meditating for years and years and years, say 20 days, 40 days, 45 days, 60-day course, and still they continue to work in the same paradigm, then they would be missing some very great part of the Buddha's teaching. So we should see it in that sense, actually. So that once we recognize this to be at the core, then one will be cognizant that something should be done about it. If one is not cognizant of it and thinks कि ये तो आगे की बात है, आगे देखी जाएगी, that more of the same will solve the problem, that is what mistake which we usually do. कि मैंने एक शिविर किया तो मुझे थोड़ा अच्छा लगा, मुझे लगा कि मेरा गुस्सा थोड़ा कम हो गया, मेरा ग्रीड थोड़ा कम हो गया, तो लगता है कि यही करता रहूँगा तो गुस्सा कम होता चला जाएगा, ग्रीड कम होता चला जाएगा, फिर तो बिल्कुल जीरो हो जाएगा, ग्रीड जीरो हो जाएगा, मैं लिबरेट हो जाऊँगा. That is a fallacy. It doesn't work like that. Because at the root of this both rag and dvesh is the notion of I. If we keep the notion of I intact, we can only have superficial cleaning of the mind, not the in-depth understanding and cleaning, which comes from the in-depth cleaning, which comes from understanding, not from a mechanical process of meditation, doing meditation in a mechanical way. So that's a very crucial point which we need to really reflect on, verify from our own experience of meditation, and see whether it is true or not. It need not be accepted as a kind of a dictate of the Buddha. One can verify, very easily verify in your deeper meditation or when you are sitting quietly, verify whether this is true. What is the root of raga and dvesha? The root of raga and dvesha is the notion of I am. I, me and mine is the starting point from where the demarcation between me and mine and the rest of the world comes. Duality arises. And there the conflicts begin. So this is a very, very powerful point which we need to reflect again and again and again, because it's so counterintuitive. This whole issue of there being no body-mind complex not being I. Now, that is the anatta. Anatta is not meaning that there is no self. It doesn't answer that question. What do you mean by self? The issue is that our panchupadana khanda dukkha, attachment to five khandas is dukkha, and that is that these five khandas are not me. So that's the key part. Because if we keep the focus away from there, then we become practice hard and harder and harder and harder. And we think that by harder practice we will be able to achieve better and better results. It works only up to a point. Beyond that, you come to a plateau and then things start getting awry. So that's the way I have realized it.
Here, sir. One question here, sir. When we say about these five khandas and trying to disassociate or working in meditation to disassociate the I from those five khandas, uh, is is more logical when you can say that this body is not me because I don't have control over this body. This body is aging, this body gets sick, and then I can, whatever material things I see around myself with my job, you can say that this is not me, this is my just association which I'm having with them. But uh, saying that there is no I, it becomes more of a concept because till the time we are perceiving ourselves as something, we don't know what I is, but there is something which appears to be I. So we can investigate in the five khandas and say that these five khandas are not I. But till the time we have not finished that investigation, there is something which remains, which is himself as I.
We carry on with that notion of I for a long time, no doubt about it. And even if we understand intellectually, to be able to put it in practice is quite tough.
Yeah.
So Prashant has made a comment that it can be introduced in the beginning along with the technique, and I have talked to a few friends, and yeah, theoretically it can be, one can catch it, understand it to some extent. Maybe those people who are very, I tried to talk to many people recently. I had conducted one workshop where I talked to some school teachers and all that. They could get a knack of it, but then to be able to see through it needs meditation. Without meditation, you cannot really. It needs certain element of self-restraint, certain element of concentration, certain basic level of investigative ability to be able to see through this point. To agree on it as a intellectual argument is comparatively easy, but to be able to see through it and put it in practice is quite tough. Really. So what we are talking about is both. Firstly, intellectually understanding, and then, of course, if we reorient our teaching methodology, it can be done to some extent with grown-up people, introducing Anapana in a manner. I think once I had mentioned, I don't know whether in this group or elsewhere. You can look at the breath arising and passing away as a great demonstration of the power of impermanence, and the whole life process being such a fickle one, because breath is going in, it stops, then comes out, then it stops, it again goes in. And so those stops, and when the breath stops and again starts, who starts it? How does it start? We have no idea, we have no clue. It's happening by the life process is doing it. I am not doing it. You can be very easily aware if you look at it very deeply, observe it very deeply. We are not doing the breathing process. It's happening automatically. The life force is doing it. And if somebody was to say that, well, from tomorrow you have to take charge of your breathing, then you won't be able to do anything other than this breathing in the life. The life will be finished. So we can reflect upon it in the light of this observations and seeing things, and understand that the consciousness is operating and it's doing it autonomously. And still it is giving us that freedom to sometimes take a hard breath, sometimes take a deep breath. It has that great flexibility of it carries on itself, and if you want to fiddle with it, it gives you the freedom to fiddle with it also. So you can be humbled by the fact that nature is taking care of us. Otherwise, what would our life have been? So such repeated reflections on the nature of human existence can make us see things happening in a manner without our control and happening automatically through the process of our being alive, the life force that is operating through consciousness and so on. In a similar manner about food, digestion and other activities which are happening automatically through the power of consciousness which is operating through us. So these reflections can be helpful. But really, deeper meditation is needed to really see the arising of ego and let it pass. Let's move further. There's some question. Is the realization of anatta gradual? Well, realization meaning the processes are gradual, but realization of the perfect thing is a sharp. I mean, the approach is gradual, obviously. It is finally the true final realization of anatta means one would be an arhat in the scheme of things, if you were to say that way. So the first stage would be breaking through the Sakkaya Ditthi paradigm, that this body and mind complex has a inner core. To break through that complex is the first one. And then would be the complete realization would be when you understand there is no I whatsoever. So even if you have broken through Sakkaya Ditthi, some element of I remains. Okay, 5 elements are not me, but there is something is me. So that is the breaking through the first fetter of Sakkaya Ditthi, according to the tradition, is seen to be a stage of Sotapanna, not complete enlightenment. So the breaking of understanding of anatta is therefore in that sense gradual. First dimension of it is breaking through Sakkaya Ditthi. Second dimension is when you have completely transcended the notion of I. Then the conceit, the feeling that I am, is also completely transcended, which happens at the final level. Is that okay?
Sir, question.
Hello.
Hear me?
Any question?
Yeah. So this concept of anatta, as you said, I think conceptually, theoretically, it can be understood, but to realize it would require a long time and effort. Now, is there a way to make progress just by introspecting and contemplating, or is meditation a compulsory ingredient of that?
See, what does this meditation mean? Meditation essentially means, meditation here means being aware of the arising of ego, because you can't do anything. You can't take a vow कि मैं आज के बाद मैं आई में विश्वास नहीं करूँगा. ऐसा तो होने वाला नहीं. Nothing is going to happen by that. So what happens is, in our day-to-day activities, if we are mindful, so that meditation here is basically the training in becoming more and more mindful. So जब मैं काम कर रहा हूँ, खा रहा हूँ, पी रहा हूँ, इंटरेक्ट कर रहा हूँ, ऑफिस में काम कर रहा हूँ, घर में काम कर रहा हूँ, इंटरेक्ट कर रहा हूँ वाइफ से, बच्चों से, if I have that ability of becoming mindful, I can see the arising of ego. In a very subtle way it will arise, or in a gross way it will arise and I shout at somebody, or in a subtle way it will arise and I'll give a wry smile, or I'll make a taunting comment, or I'll take something personally. My wife tells me something and I get hurt, or my son says something and I get hurt. So I can see, oh, this is the arising of ego. So that's all the practice really is needed, because you can't do anything other than that. So to overcome this is to see through the arising process and deny its reality at that moment, actually when it arises. Actually when ego arises, we see, oh, this is just a thought. That I am hurt is just a thought, which is real. Yes, it is just a thought. There is no I who is getting hurt. It's just an unpleasant word which I am taking personally. So if every time such a thing happens, we reflect, every time we reflect, then that habit will slowly change. So it's a very simple process to understand, but of course quite tough to do. So that is the meditation really, which is needed for this purpose. That every moment, whenever we interact with the world, many times you will not become aware even. Ego has arisen and we have shouted and done everything and or got hurt and sulking and all that. It happens with all of us. And then you realize, oh, why am I sulking? On who is getting hurt? On what? Unpleasant word and I got hurt? Or unpleasant weather and I got hurt? Or so on. And then you suddenly realize, oh, that this is also a thought. So the whole process is that we realize that the notion of I is a construct, is a thought. Like any other thought which sometimes arises. अब हम बैठे रहते हैं तो कभी कभी विचार आते हैं ना, पास्ट का कोई थॉट आ जाएगा, फ्यूचर का थॉट आ जाएगा. उसी तरह मैं हूँ, ये भी एक थॉट है. If we see it in that light, then slowly and slowly we reduce the kind of tenacity with which this thought grips us. Actually, this thought has gripped us so strongly कि उसको हम थॉट देख ही नहीं पाते, उसको हम रियलिटी मानते हैं. So that's the way which I can see, which I feel and work as been practicing that way. It seems to have some effect, certainly. Because I can't see any other way of practice really. You can't kind of experience anatta in any way,
Sure.
other than
So,
transcendent experience of emptiness. Sometimes we experience, if you are in midst of a mountains and sitting without any thoughts, without any worry, there are certain moments when you realize there's no observer and no observation. Those are the kind of mystic moments, so-called mystic moments. But to deepen that realization, one has to work through the day-to-day life. That's the way. For householders, that's the way. Work through
so I was specifically referring to, so I mean, some people are perhaps by nature more introspective than others. They tend to think a lot on what's going on, what they're feeling, what's their reaction. So being mindful of what's happening and whether the I is arising, that's clearly something to do. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is the role of, let's say, allocating time separately and doing things like Annapana, for example. Now, in your experience, have you found that as a supportive tool for people to become more mindful, or a completely necessary tool, or have you seen people become mindful or increase their mindfulness without necessarily doing, that dedicated, close your eyes, watch your breathing exercise, for example?
Yeah, irrespective of what exercise you choose, I have not seen people really very mindful who are not doing any regular practice of that kind. I have not met. Maybe there may be. I have not met. Even before I started practicing Vipassana, I was in contact with many sages of various denominations. They also all had certain practices of some kind or the other. They may not be observing breath, they may be chanting Om to concentrate the mind. There's another who would have some exercise which now I can see was similar to observing body, but relating it to God and so on. Or some Advaita practitioners who would reflect and actually practice. Reflect meaning I'm not the mind, or I'm not the body. So you take a bitter food and you feel bitter, then you say no, I'll not take it bitter, and do it again and again and again. So repetitive practice is to get out of those habit patterns. It's basically changing the habit pattern. So how you do it is your choice. But some methods are more effective than others. Good. Let's move to the next slide. So this is the point which Raman had actually made. The second statement, isn't it, Raman?
Yes.
So, comments on this slide?
Silesh is typing.
Suresh says he's not sure what the quote by Nisargadatta means. Who will explain it?
So,
Akhilesh is quite good in Advaita, so I think Akhilesh should explain.
Sir, I will try to explain, but I am not good in Advaita. So I think just trying to understand it literally. So you are like a man holding flashlight trying to run beyond its stream. So if you say that the problem is I, and then I am holding the flashlight to see, then the problem is not, then there is a problem, because what you have to do is not hold the flashlight and see in front, but instead see who is holding the flashlight. So I don't know if that is what he meant, but that's what I understand.
Raman and Deepak?
Yeah, I think this goes back to the discussion we were having, I think, on the previous slide too, which is this ability to or this effort to fix the seeming problem, these sufferings, by trying to do ways and methods that are again conditioned by your thoughts about self and how you view the world, will not lead you to the way out, because the methods themselves are sort of affected and somewhat controlled and steered by the views that are causing that problem. So there will have to be a completely different approach to it. You will first have to realize the limitation or the futility of your current views, which are also affecting the efforts you are making to go out of those. So it's almost like saying you want to lift yourself up by standing in a bucket and trying to pick that bucket up, if I may use another analogy. You have to have an external view, a new, fresh view. From within the system, you can't lift yourself up. Now, this is not to suggest that there has to be a sort of an external intervention, but your notion of self is not going to lift you up. It has to be something outside that self which will lift you up. It's sort of how I look at it.
Deepak, you have to say anything?
So, what Raman has said is just an exception that trying to solve the problems by seeing them as problems will never be probably able to come out of that. If we try to do something, then something else will come, and then something else will come. So, because we're still stuck in that loop where you're seeing them certain view, which is probably more biased or not correct. Unless we come out of that view, we can't see the original problem or come out of it.
Well, what I understand is that the point is being made is that जैसे फ्लैश लाइट से एक पर्टिकुलर व्यू बन जाता है ना, इतना व्यू है आपका, तो लिमिट हो गया व्यू, उसी लिमिटेड व्यू के हिसाब से ही आप चल सकते हैं, उससे आगे तो बढ़ नहीं सकते हैं. तो जो अगर आपका देखने का नज़रिया, पैराडाइम जो है, सोचने का तरीका ऐसा है कि भाई मुझे अपने राग द्वेष खत्म करने हैं, और इस राग द्वेष का कारण है कि मेरे में अहम भाव बहुत ज़्यादा है, तो मुझे कोशिश करनी पड़ेगी कि मैं अहम भाव को निकाल सकूं। तो उसमें इनहेरेंट कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन है भाई उस व्यू में, कि मैं ही प्रॉब्लम हूँ और मैं ही अपने आप को नेगेट कर दूंगा। ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है कि मैं अपने आप को एफर्ट करके आई से फ्री हो जाऊँ? वो पॉसिबल नहीं है, उसमें एक इनहेरेंट कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन है। सो जो आपका, अगर हमारा परसेप्शन ये रहे कि मुझे ही एफर्ट कर करके अपने सारे राग द्वेष निकालने हैं और मुझे करना ही पड़ेगा, नहीं तो और कोई तरीका नहीं है, और ये नहीं समझें कि राग द्वेष का मूल कारण ये है कि मुझ में मैं का भाव बहुत ज़्यादा है, तो फिर हम वी विल नेवर बी एबल टू सॉल्व द प्रॉब्लम. There is that inherent contradiction which is there in this approach, which is centered on self-effort and self-effort to try to get out of the notion of I. You can put in self-effort to become a better human being. That is certainly possible. Self-improvement is possible. But self-transcendence through self-effort in that manner, कि मैं करके ही छोड़ूंगा, ऐसा होने वाला नहीं है. मैं कुछ हद तक अपने को रेस्ट्रेंट कर सकता हूँ, चोरी करना छोड़ सकता हूँ, झूठ बोलना छोड़ सकता हूँ कुछ समय के लिए, लेकिन मैं अपने आप को इस बात से मुक्त करा लूँ कि मैं हूँ, कि मैं नाम की कोई चीज़ नहीं है इस 5 खंडों में, वो सिर्फ एफर्ट से होने वाली नहीं है. उसके लिए अंडरस्टैंडिंग की ज़रूरत है. और एफर्ट का जो है, नेचर ऑफ एफर्ट कैन नॉट बी बेस्ड ऑन आई, cannot be a positive effort. It has to be an effort at it. There has to be an effort of a different kind, if you may put it, which is actually not an effort. It is a effortless understanding of the reality, trying to reiterate the reality again and again, not allowing the unreal to deceive us continuously. अभी तो हम लोग we are getting deceived by unreal all the time, deceived by our own mental concoctions. उस डिसेप्शन से निकलने के लिए हमको नॉलेज की ज़रूरत है, समझ की ज़रूरत है, और वो समझ को सत्य मान के उसी के हिसाब से जीवन जीने की ज़रूरत है. We need to live in accordance with the truth of anatta, and if you live according to that truth, then the things will be then there is a possibility of overcoming this illusion of mind. Yeah, that is true. It is wrongly written. It should be is undermining. Yeah. That statement, वो slide में वो probably that may be causing confusion. जो slide में लिखा हुआ ना, विशाल गुप्ता जी की quotation जो है, you are holding within the method you are using is undermining. in नहीं, is undermining होना चाहिए. वो ठीक है. Not a struggle but an abiding means हम जो कोशिश कर रहे हैं ना कि मैं इससे मुक्त हो जाऊं, इस इल्यूजन से मुक्त हो जाऊं, वो उस कोशिश से नहीं काम होगा. उस स्थिति में अपने को स्थित करने से काम हो. स्थित कैसे करेंगे कि जब भी वैसी स्थिति, नेगेटिव स्थिति अराइज होती है, हमको लगता है कि हम जाग रहा है, वी नेगेट इट. नेगेट इट मीन्स वी से नो, दिस इज नॉट ट्रू, दिस इज ए thought, this is not the reality. So, because reality is, there is no I, there is no ego. So once we understand it thoroughly, then every time it arises, we just become aware of its arising, and then in the process of becoming aware, it automatically gets negated. Yeah, that's right. Akhilesh writes it. It is this concept of it is the concept used by these Japanese and Koreans, actionless action. You recall in last session we had at my home, I had played a song of Kabir. उसमें भी ऐसी बातें थी. दीपक को याद है कि नहीं? सारे कर्म हमसे हमने किए, हम कर्मों से न्यारे. So at one level all actions are done by me, at another level I am different. I have not done anything. Things are happening. You remember there was that Kabir का भजन हमने सुना था, ना ही धर्मी ना ही अधर्मी, ना मैं जति ना कामी. I think if you search it in the net and you can immediately locate. अगर तुम उसके lyrics भी कहीं ना कहीं तो मिल ही होंगे आजकल तो net में सब कुछ मिल जाता है. So if you read those lyrics, they are a beautiful explanation of the path of actionless action or path of non-doing, doing and yet not doing. Abiding, that is what is meant by abiding.
I think Silesh had a comment as well. Why would the method undermine our intent? Don't we need some basic method? I think the quote does not say the method is undermining the intent. The quote says the view you are holding within the method you are using, that's undermining the intent.
That's right. You're mentioning that particular view, which means that particular approach which you have, that particular approach of solving the problem which you have, that approach is not allowing you to see the totality of it. You're seeing it in a limited perspective. It's not that there's nothing to be, it's not, this issue of nothing to be done, we are already perfect. That has been the bane of the other extreme of the Advaitic perception में वो एक problem रही है. हम तो पहले मुक्त हैं, हम तो सबको मुक्ति है हमारे में, प्योर कॉन्शियसनेस पहले ही चल रही, तो हमें करने की क्या जरूरत है, जो मर्जी ऐसे करो. So that is another extreme of kind of extreme view, which is again a big obstruction in realization, because it's not theoretical realization, it is actually living and abiding in that realization moment to moment of our life.
Okay, I'll move to next.
Can you get that on net? On net इस उसपे वो जो एक ये टाइप करके देखो सर्च में गूगल में, मैं करता हूँ, देखता हूँ मिलता है क्या.
बता दीजिए सर, बता दो.
वो बहुत ही सुंदर है, अगर आप उसको लोकेट करो ना. Let me see if I can locate it on my phone.
आपको कहाँ ढूंढने में?
Just say lyrics of Kabir.
What are the lyrics, sir? Can you just
ना ही धर्मी ना ही अधर्मी. Just put it in the beginning.
ना मैं धर्मी ना अधर्मी.
Just lyrics and put it on the screen for all of us to see.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello,
Hello,
Rajesh.
sir. Hello. So sorry I'm late.
That's fine. We're not those students who run away when the teacher is not coming late.
Please, sir. First of all, I don't feel like a teacher, and sir, you have been a teacher for us for so long, so
We all do the same and take on different roles different times.
no, sir, not for this thing at least.
हाँ भी दिखाओ हमको कहाँ लिरिक्स मिल गए तो फिर हम सब लोग देख लेना. बड़ा मुझे तो बहुत अच्छे लगते हैं, आप लोग भी देखिए, उसको चिंतन करिए, तो द इश्यू ऑफ अबाइडिंग एंड स्ट्रगल विल बिकम वेरी क्लियर. जो
मैंने टाइप करे हैं.
हाँ, तुमने सारा टाइप ही कर दिया.
People copy paste
Copy paste.
So you can read it. ना मैं धर्मी ना ही अधर्मी. So I am neither of them. Why? Because actions are happening through me. I am not the doer. ना मैं जति ना कामी हूँ. So I am neither a ascetic nor I am a householder or a one who is given to lust. ना मैं कहता ना मैं सुनता. So neither I speak nor I listen. But I am doing, actually it is happening, but I am not doing it. ना मैं सेवक स्वामी हूँ. I am neither the servant nor the master. So this is the kind of abiding which is being mentioned in Advaitic thought. ना मैं बंधा ना मैं मुक्ता. तो ना मैं बंधन में हूँ ना ही मैं मुक्त हूँ. There's nothing, nobody who's going to get into trap or nobody who's going to get liberated.
ना निर्बाध स्वांगी हूँ.
ना काहू से न्यारा हूँ ना काहू का संगी हूँ. I'm neither the attached to anybody nor I am non-attached to others. ना हम नरक लोक जाते ना हम स्वर्ग से जा रहे हैं. So I'm not going to go to hell or heaven. सब ही कर्म हमारा किया. All the actions are apparently done by me. हम कर्मंते न्यारे. But I'm not the doer. Apparently they are done by me. I'm not the doer. Then of course he says, ये मत को कोई बिरला ही बूझे. This understanding very difficult. Very few people can get this understanding. So सतगुरु सो हो बैठे हो. So utter so बैठे हो is written Satguru. The word is utter so बैठे हो. Since the one who has got that understanding, he is then sitting still. He is not actually effectively doing anything. मत कबीर काहू को थापे. Don't hold on to anything. मत काहू को मेटे. Not don't push anything else. Don't attach to anything. Don't run away from anything. That is the essence of it. So that is the abiding which is being meant in the Advaitic concept, which means complete non-identification with the body-mind complex. So you don't take it personally. Actions are happening, you don't take them personally. You're seeing, hearing, you're replying, you're thinking, you're doing. Things are happening, you're not taking it personally. So that is the poetic explanation of the concept of Anatta. So, Rajesh is here, please take over.
आगे तो बस स्लाइड्स पर आ जा. बड़े नहीं यार कैमरा में आऊंगा. नहीं देख तो क्या
इनसे पेश हो गया.
चीज पे ध्यान.
Yes, Akhilesh, that those verses which you are saying, na खोजी होए तो तुरते ही मिलियो, that is of another song. That is this मोको कहाँ ढूंढे रे बंदे. उसकी last line ये. मैं तो तेरे पास रे.
This we done.
There it is. That I am in the breath, every breath which a person says. Yes. So ये जो लाइन आपने लिखी ना, खोजी होए तो तुरते ही मिलियो पल भर की तलाश में. This is the last verse of that poem. मोको कहाँ ढूंढे मैं तो तेरे पास रे. Yes, Rajesh. So हमने कौन सी स्लाइड देखे थे?
I think we've gone till this slide. I think.
उनको हमने नहीं, अभी जो हमने रिवाइज किए थे ना, वो कौन सा था? दीपक विल टेल यू. Now you please start from here and go further quickly so that we can revise everything. Which needs revision every time. This
So
you
I
can
think-
do.
Yeah, this is. I think this is about making sure that whenever we are trying anything spiritual, we are aligned with the right view and not taking, not moving with a view that will not take us forward. So I think it's also about what is the destination that we have in the mind. If the destination is peace of mind, then all thoughts would be in opposition to what we want to achieve, and they will seem like hindrances. And if the view is that we want to understand the mind and what its content and its working, then everything that comes in the content of the thoughts will become an subject for investigation. And so if we look deeply into our mind, we find that mind is a great tool for assimilating sense data and navigating through life. What we have done to our mind is that we have taken the sense of security that mind gives us, which is the fight for life, uh, and we have internalized this, and we see lines where there are none. So we have kind of exaggerated this tool and allowed it to take over us. And this is, so it's a biological necessity for us to feel separate as an organism, but actually, in truth, we are not. And this sense of separation is an artificial one that the mind creates itself in its own contents. Uh, so the mind artificially creates these divisions where we feel that the divisions like there's a body which is owned by a sense of me, and there's a conditioned response of what like reflex actions or responses to the circumstances that we are faced with, and there's a all powerful sense of self, which is the possessor or the controller of the mind, and that is the pure sense of me, where the sense of me comes from, where I feel that I make decisions, where I feel that I am and I drive things and I drive my body and I drive my mind. But it's an artificial division, and it's an artificial construct that we have created. Uh, and I think the fundamental principle is that when we're traversing spiritual path, uh, we don't have a mind. Uh, it's the path has created a sense of you and me, and that's how it perceives it. So it's also another way of looking at is yeah, Prashant. Okay, so
I think it's very important and very powerful, which we must reflect upon. The mind has created a sense of you and me, and it is not we have a mind. Normal perception तो यही रहता है ना, मेरा मन बहुत खराब है, बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, मन बेचैन हो रहा है. This is normally what we think. What he's trying to point out is that this mind has actually created this sense of I, not that I have got a mind. And this is a very complete inversion of our normal thinking. उसको हम उसके बारे में सजग रहें तो the problems get sorted out themselves. This is a very key thing which needs to be highlighted.
and then there's a mention of Brahmanabba Sutta, where there was a question to Buddha, and this also tells how Buddha tried to explain the kind. You can see the kind of ownership. Who owns what is contained in what. Like we say, we hear from or we experience the word from our sense doors. Then who holds the sense doors? Mind holds the sense doors. Who holds the mind? Awareness holds the mind. Who holds the awareness? Nibbana or. So I'm not sure about the last one, but I think the number 2 to 3 is very important. We believe that we are the control of our awareness, which is kind of misunderstood as attention. We believe that we can take our awareness to the point where we want to take, or the sense of me is the owner of the awareness. Actually, it's the other way around. We can actually try and broaden the awareness and be aware of what the mind is doing. And you can see that this sense of me that was initially of the awareness evaporates it, direct your awareness there. So the last one is beyond at least my personal reach, so I can't say whether the awareness is held by an unconditioned or the Khan, or but at least the this concept of who's being aware is also important. Generally believe that I am trying to be aware and this is my sensations and I have control over where my awareness. So in the third bullet, by mind as the author global consciousness, everything is part of it. See, it's not about, I don't think it's about local consciousness or global consciousness. At least when I look at it, I don't look at it from what I cannot perceive. What I try to or I cannot recognize. I try to do is that I try to look inside my mind and my capabilities of what I can perceive. And from my understanding is that if you remain still enough in your mind, you can see that the last moment you were creating a sense of self, and this moment it is not. So it means there must be something that holds the sense of self also. So there is something, you don't know what. There is a pure awareness or just awareness, plain awareness that is that holds the sense of self, which was created last moment, but it does not seem to be there this moment. So, sir, you want to comment on that?
It's true. It is not. There is no mention of global consciousness in Buddha's terms, and even in this, it is a common. I mean, I won't say common. It is something which can come easily within our own experience. That the notion of I is being created by my mind. It's actually my mind, which is, if you want to put it that way, which is creating the notion of I. Because when I interact with somebody and I get suppose I am praised, then I feel, oh, I am being praised. So you can be aware of this I as a reason. Or somebody is criticizing, then I get afraid, or I don't like it. So you can be aware, this I as a reason. Because otherwise, there's nothing to get afraid, or nothing to get puffed up, or nothing to get really worried about. But it is again that thought of I. Actually, it is a thought which is arising. And the thought is so tenaciously held on as truths. So we always think there is I who is getting hurt. मुझे ही तो बुरा कह रहे हो तुम, मुझे ही तो क्रिटिसाइज कर रहे हो. वो मैं कौन है जिसको क्रिटिसाइज किया जा रहा है, वो we don't investigate and we take it to be real. Point being made is that we are a part of mental processing of the mind. जैसे दूसरे thought आते रहते हैं, वैसे ये thought भी है. It is also like any other thoughts. So we should not take it. जैसे आप बैठे हैं शांति से, पुरानी कोई बात याद आ गई, भविष्य की कोई बात याद आ गई, you're suddenly planning for future, and then suddenly you realize that just mind was frittering away here and there. And now if you say, oh, my mind was frittering away, I have become, मैं इतना साधना करने वाला फिर भी मेरा माइंड ऐसे होता रहता है, तो अब आपने एक और उस पर मुलम्मा लगा लिया कि मैं हूँ. That also is a thought. I have it. So just as other thoughts are there, similarly there is a thought, I am. Unfortunately, this thought is persistent, constantly operating with us. So we tend to think of it as reality. But if you deny it again and again, deny its reality again and again, and take it like a thought arising and passing away, in due course its hold on us will come down. And then we'll get freer and freer from that notion of I. So when he says we exist only because mind thinks us into creation. Our mind is creating us. It's not a reality. That's the point. It's not any global consciousness. It's our own mind which is creating this.
Here I wanted to mention Ajahn Sumedho. So I think Ajahn Sumedho, in many of his talks and discourses, he says that when he says that go and take refuge in awareness, and he clearly says that this awareness is not where you go. It's an awareness, you can say, as if you are standing behind your mind. He uses this term multiple times. It feels as if you're standing behind your mind, and you could see that this how it holds the mind. So, and that is also another day that Ajahn Sumedho mentions, and he has beautifully tried to explain that every time we try to do something, if it is comes from the sense of me, then it's gonna go into another loop, and then we can get caught there.
Yes. You see, when
So,
we meditate formally, whenever we are meditating and mind wanders away to some thought, then suddenly we remember, na? What is it that makes us suddenly remember? कि अरे मुझे ध्यान करना था. How it happens? That is the power of mindfulness, power of awareness. That it suddenly remembers, oh, this is what I should be doing, and I am doing something else. And then that awareness which is aware that mind has wandered away is obviously different from the wandering of the mind. So you can easily see that. In all the meditative processes, you can actually see, oh, अभी मन जब भटक रहा था तब तो एक कॉन्शियसनेस ऑपरेट कर रही थी ना, और जैसे ही आपको पता चला कि मन का भटक रहा है, तो वो भटकता हुआ मन नहीं जान सकता कि मन भटक रहा है. समथिंग एल्स विल हैव टू नो कि मन भटक रहा है. सो देयर इज द डिफरेंस इन दैट. That is the kind of multiple faculties of awareness. So this is the awareness which is because you have made a mental resolve that I should be mindful. So that mental resolve, that intention to be mindful, keeps on operating whenever it gets an opportunity. So depending on the practice, you become more and more. Those episodes of losing awareness become lesser and lesser.
Yeah, absolutely. So this I was using in one of our discussions here, and I was saying that let's try to contemplate on who's the owner of that reminder. It doesn't feel like that we own it because we were lost, and so the sense of ownership on that reminder will never be there, because the sense of I is getting reminded. It's not that who's reminding it. And similarly, on the other side, there is when we get lost, we don't feel like we don't have a sense of ownership of these thoughts that are getting lost, because as soon as we have the sense of ownership of that, we will bring it back. So there are even if at just intellectual level we see, there are parts of the mind that are outside the sense of me. These reminders, when we come back to sense of me, and the distractions when the sense of me gets dissolved, and we just get distracted towards some other thoughts. So if we just contemplate on that and try to just look at it when we are meditating. Basic question. So we are talking about two factors here. We are talking about two factors here. The one that is getting lost and the one that is reminding. Now, when you say, if you were to identify yourself with the one who is getting lost, then you say someone else is reminding me, and that someone else is consciousness or whatever you ascribe it to. Boolean logic says the other three possibilities are: you identify yourself with someone else and say, I am reminding something that got lost. Or you say, I am the one who got lost and I am also the one who is reminding myself. And the fourth possibility says, I am neither the lost nor the one who is reminding. Which position are you taking? So what I'm saying is, these things are contents of the mind, and as soon as you try to see which one of is you will see none. You are. So is the fourth position No, I don't know what your fourth position is. What I'm saying is that which is neither the lost nor the one who is reminding.
That's the conclusion you're making, but it's saying that don't make the conclusion.
Right.
Just try to investigate.
Because there is the sense of self is very, very recognizable. Right? We feel it all the time. That's a very good starting point. And if you just see how it behaves, does it come into existence or it's always there? Does it ever go away, or it's always there? Because this all these, as far as I think is that most of the intellect, as I said last time, intellectual investigation happens within the sense of self. It is its part. So to conclude something about anything outside it, within the sense of self, within the intellect, is like getting into that loop again, where I see that yes, if the sense of self, when the sense of self is coming into existence, it may come into existence like this. It's about very recognizable. We just have to see that how it comes, and is it artificial, is it permanent, or and if somebody would really able to see all of this thing as really permanent, then he would really become enlightened. It's just that you get those glimpses, you get those pointers when your mind is quiet and you're in meditation. You get to see that, and then you say, "Aha, right." No, there may be some. Actually, I didn't ask the right question. If you look at the first bullet point, you're saying there are two styles of spiritual paths. We are outside the mind and need to work. So then, in that case, you're saying this notion of self is false. And no. So that same thing, which is there is a good part and a distracted part, and the good part needs to fix the distracted part. That's the first one, right? Which I understand what you're saying, but this notion of then undivided mind, right, in context of the one that gets distracted and then the reminder comes from somewhere else, right? This part so what is your, so when you say undivided mind path, right? What is the position there? The position is that you need to recognize or see that this is an undivided mind. These are the different contents of the mind. Sense of self that says, including the reminder. Including the reminder. Okay. So there is no separate consciousness. Or is there one? I don't know, because I cannot recognize that. All I can say is that if you look at the sense of me, which is in the first part, is the I, which drives rest of the mind. I need to do this. I need to bring my attention to this. I need to take my body to this. I need to do this. The sense of me is also contemplative. That's the undivided mind. Now the eternal question is, then who am I? Then that is, I don't know, unanswerable. From where I see. What I think this, I want to go back to that second sutta of Buddha, where he says that look at what you are not. 5 khandas, I am not that. And he did not answer any time what you are. But the biggest sense of self जो हमारी ownership लगती है वो नहीं है. ये तो that is the undivided. वो नहीं है हम, या वो भी हमारा ही part है. Because that's where I'm getting confused. So at least that part is because our understanding so far was this is not self, but your undivided mind seems to say that is also part of the. So then I'm getting confused here actually. As soon as you say that is also part of me, right? Including this, including that, then where is that me? What I'm saying is that as soon as you look at anything me, it dissolves. You just included everything and then you created an owner. That is also part. You created an artificial owner where sense of self is created. Within whose control sense of self gets controlled. And actually you move the sense of self from here to here. So the main problem I think we are discussing, or at least I am struggling with, is over the years that we've been discussing this, have established that this notion of self is the problem. Okay? But from this undivided mind, and therefore we need to get rid of that as far we move away from that notion of self, the better it is, as Sir was explaining. But what is now causing me some confusion is when you say, because we consider that self, or that notion of self, as being bad or something to be fixed, that is causing a division of mind and creating another problem. That is the problem, and this is us. So
No, when you say let me go back to your argument. When you said that you concluded that the sense of self, you have to go away, as far away as possible. Who needs to go?
So what's your answer to that?
What I'm saying is, you actually are saying another sense of self is saying I need to go away from sense of self.
Right, and so therefore to avoid that, what should be done?
If you just look at, you will see, oh, first I was thinking that I need to go away from sense of self, and again as you look and say, oh, this is again an I which is wants to go away from sense of self.
And then you say, oh, now I realize that I should not do it, then that's the third.
Right. And then
so then how do you get out of this?
If you
But then-
and this you cannot get out of it intellectually.
So then coming out of
You
it,
have to see it and it goes away.
coming out is only the negation, right?
Right. Sir?
Well, it's obviously it's very tough nut to crack. If I recall, I think it's mentioned somewhere in the book also. What the Buddha has pointed out repeatedly is that any notion of self whatsoever, whichever you may take, whether you take the materialistic notion, body, self, or the so-called no self, even that there is no self, it says any of these notions will not be satisfactory solution to the problems which you are facing. So that's why you say, I follow a middle path between this model of self or that model of self. And what is that middle path? Avidya Pachaya Sankhara. That is it. That things are happening, there is conditions are driving things and they are happening, and suffering is because of conditions. You remove the conditions, suffering will remove, that's it. So it doesn't posit that whether the self is single or universal. So all the models of self, whichever you can think of, he rejects them all, including the model that there is no self, or that there is a universal self, or there is a self which is a single soul, or there is a complete materialistic paradigm that there is no self. Yavat jivet sukham jivet, bhasmi bhuttasya shariram, or punarjanmana vidyate. He says that no model will satisfy. Any model of self which you take will create a problem, and therefore you understand the cause of suffering arising out of the dependent origination, and then understand it through that. Don't bother about who am I. If you try to answer that for certainty, you will be caught in the web. You can't get out of it. So he points it out again and again, and that's one of the most difficult things for a rationalist to understand, that he is denying us the opportunity of coming to a final conclusion of who am I. He says none of the solutions will be satisfactory. You can live in a speculative mode, and the universal consciousness which is pervading everywhere, that also can be questioned in various other, you can always have counter questions to that. So he therefore says that we should leave this whole domain of questioning as caught in a particular view. You are caught in a particular view. Leave those views and come to Sammaditthi. And what is Sammaditthi? See the things as they really are, as you can experience them. What you can experience, there is suffering, unpleasantness, and this is the cause of suffering, and this is the way out of it. And I think in the book also somewhere this mention is made. I think I'll try to see if I can, but maybe Rajesh can go on. I'll try to see, because the main issues which come out of that is I think the issue maybe must be later of interconnectedness, which I think is the starting point of getting away from the illusion of individual identity. The last time we discussed the interconnectedness ke baare mein.
So Prashant has a question of sound of silence is an actual sound one can hear and focus on that as an object of meditation. That's my understanding. Would be good to confirm. We'll discuss this.
See, sound of silence is something what I have understood and used is as an expedient means of not allowing mind to go here and there. I don't posit that this is the pure consciousness. I don't think that is really correct to say.
Probably, sir, my understanding of sound of silence is that it's more like anapana, which will quieten your mind and will stop the distraction of the mind to a certain extent. Then beyond that, if you just leave it there, one gets only increased concentration and some calmness. But if one doesn't take the next step of investigation, it won't lead to anything further.
You see, this, I think Silesh has mentioned about this, he relates it to anatta. So, yes, Ajahn Sumedho does relate it to anatta, that is true. He says that when he abides in sound of silence, no thoughts of I arise. So, to that extent, it is an expedient means. I think he mentioned in some of the discourse also that he treats it because he was questioned by people. Are you saying that this is pure consciousness? And then he feels getting trapped somewhere. He says, I don't want to make a theoretical statement on the philosophy of it, but it is a very good expedient means, which those of us who can hear it can feel it. It is a good means. In the amidst confusion, when you get lost, you suddenly shift your attention there, and the mind gets collected back, and you can become more mindful again and be at peace. Even though the world around you is whirling, you can be at peace. So to that extent, it is certainly good. But to give it a philosophical significance is quite tough. I'm not really in a position to see how it can be called pure consciousness. I don't know. I can't see that. He mentions it at some, many discourses of Buddha, you find different statements made at different times. Similar things you find in Ajahn Sumedho's talks also. At some points he mentions it, but then he will retract, no, I don't mean it, don't take it literally. But to me it seems that like this. So it is his personal experience. So the idea is not to develop another concept. So as it has been pointed out, an undivided mind also is not a concept. It has to be experienced. It is only a statement that by entering into argumentation, we divide the mind. When we stop it, that state is called undivided mind. It is not something to be grasped again, because if you grasp to any concept, you will be in trouble. We will again get into some other philosophy of some kind or the other. Philosophy in the sense of a mental construct, because it is a mental construct. So something that the beauty of Buddha's teaching is that his concept of reality is not the Greek concept of reality, the absolute reality which is there pervading all the world. He doesn't give these concepts. He speaks of something which you can experience. The concept of reality is that. Something, the fundamental element below which you cannot reduce the experience. The experience can be reduced to hardness. You can't reduce it below hardness and softness. Heat, cold. Vibration, no vibration. So Agni, Prithvi, Jal, Dhatu, that's how we identify. There are the four elements. Or you can reduce it to the level of 6 ayatanas. So he is very, very careful in not talking of anything which is speculative. So that I think we should always keep in mind. Anybody who is trying to make a speculation, we should be careful that it has a limited, it can become a trap.
Yeah, and just I had thought about the sound of silence a couple of times, and Ajahn Sumedho does mention in a couple of times is a maybe indicator of the unconscious or out of the conscious. Or what is it called? Was it pure consciousness?
Yeah, he does mention it, but at other times he refutes it also.
Right.
Other times
So
he
I
says,
think
please take it as an expedient means. Don't say that I am questioning the Theravada tradition. So don't get me into that trouble.
yeah, and I think I take the expedient means for investigation as the key here, because
Yeah, I also
there
take
are
it expedient means. I can't see it as a manifestation of. I mean, of course, in one sense, everything is a manifestation of your consciousness. If you see it in that way, even the arising of a unwholesome thought is happening because of that reason. So we need not get into that trap.
and moreover something that is intriguing in, for example, especially in Sound of Silence, which is another point of the point that investigation brings us to, is that it doesn't have a beginning or end. Right? That's very intriguing stuff. But if you look deeply, even the breathing does not have a beginning or end. And if you see how does the breathing is coming and where is it going, you can see it as a manifestation of your consciousness, because you don't own it. You cannot control its beginning or end. And the same is true with Sound of Silence. So if you just concentrate on breathing or concentrate on Sound of Silence, you will get concentration. But if you try to investigate and just keep your option open, but still be aware of it, that maybe the experience means to have things which are good to investigate.
Good.
So I think Akhilesh did mention that if we end up treating undivided mind as a concept, it will divide the mind again. We understand the good mind and the bad mind because we can see it today. Maybe we don't understand undivided mind because we don't see it yet.
Yeah. You see,
And
Prashant,
Prashant is
point, observation of arising and passing away of mental physical phenomena can help in seeing them as phenomena versus idea. That is true. But the trouble is that we usually see them as my anger and my problem and my greed, and that's the real issue. So the arising of I has also to be seen in the actual day-to-day operation. Then we become aware arising of the ego. This is which is an attachment to thought, attachment to perception. So once we observe that, then slowly the hold of concept of I will come down. Then it's become easier to negate it. Doing it again and again and again, then you can easily negate it. Why am I getting worried about my image and my perception being right and others being wrong all the time? So then slowly we try to get out of that trap of caught. Of course, we are caught in five khandhas, which is the perception is the biggest trap actually. And the whole idea of samadhi is right perception in a way. That our perception becomes right. We see the things in the truth as they really are, not as they appear to be.
And so I find that things which have a which can take you into this attachment are difficult to see as phenomena. For example, the perceptions and mental phenomena.
Yeah.
But if you just observe the Sound of Silence and for example, the breathing, it is extremely difficult even at intellectual level to see who's the controller of this. You cannot get attached to it because you don't own it.
Yeah.
And that maybe because of my limitation, but
No, that is
that
true. That is an expedient means to extricate yourself from them. But we have to actually, the way out through suffering is not by running out of it, but going through it. So this, if we use the Sound of Silence in that manner, then we are actually using it as a escape route.
right.
We should not, when I suffer, I should go through that and see, oh, this is why I am suffering. Because of perception, attachment to body, attachment to perception, attachment to habit patterns, to sankharas, and at the root of them is the notion of I, my thinking, my intellect, my abilities being questioned. So those things, more we see them through and through, slowly and slowly, their hold becomes lesser.
I need observation of arising in us.
We can't strategize our way to freedom. There's no strategy possible. It's only to loosen the bond. We can only loosen the bond by seeing it again and again for what it really is, a bond, not the reality. We tend to take it as real. मुझको ही तो गाली दी और मुझको तुम बुरा भला कह रहे हो. मेरा बेटा मेरी बात नहीं मानता, कैसे हो गया? तो मैं आ गया ना हाथ में. तो उस बॉन्ड को देखेंगे तो फिर वो बॉन्ड धीरे 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 कम हो, तब सफरिंग निकलेगी. और अगर मैं सफ़र कर रहा हूँ और मैं कहूँ चलो यार छोड़ो, सांस को देखो, इन सम सेंस इट इज़ गुड, इन सम सेंस इट इज़ गुड. संवेदना को देख लो, सांस को देख लो, साउंड ऑफ साइलेंस देख लो, बट यू मस्ट कट थ्रू दैट. Use this as only as a kind of what should I say, as a retreat from the fire. But then they go through the fire by seeing the root cause of suffering. Four noble truths should be seen through them. The cause of suffering should be abandoned. By observing the breath, you are not going to abandon the cause of suffering. You are actually escaping in some subtle way. You may say that I am observing the suffering indirectly. Okay, indirectly. Why not do it directly? So that's very important. If one has to really break through the I, one should go through it. Of course, these are helpful aids. Seeing through sound of silence, observing sensations, observing breath, they are very helpful because immediately आप किसी को कह दो कि चलो आग लगी हुई है घुस जाओ उसके अंदर, तो मरेगा ही. He has to have preparation for it. But eventually, one has to weather through this. Eventually, one has to see that the root cause of suffering is this whole attachment to I, which takes various shapes and forms. So let's go further. One more slide. ये तो
I think we did cover it last time.
this we covered in last.
I think this is another some more insights into the sense of self and how it does it. How is it an artificial concept? The author mentions that which sees and that which thinks about what it sees are two different dimensions. So this concept actually has been used by many people and including Krishnamurti and many others. And Buddha has himself mentioned this in the Vaya Sutta. He says that it seems that there will only be seen. So it's about that which sees and that which thinks about what it sees are two different things. And what happens is that we move very quickly to the word or the symbolic expression of the mind towards what we experience. We miss what the word and holds and the perception. So it's about when you can feel it. For example, when you are hearing something, you see when you are hearing it and completely hearing it, you are completely absorbed in it. But you can come to a point, or you can suddenly just stand behind and see that you are hearing, and then you realize that what is hearing, what was hearing, and that which was getting identified with it are two different things. So we actually hear and very very quickly move into its expression or its intellectual symbolic expression of the mind, which is also coming from the identification of who is hearing it. So, but the paradox is that sense of self formed by the word must work hard to discover the wordless, and that's a paradox. It cannot. And in Bhaya Sutta, I think Buddha mentions, and he takes all the senses, and then says that if you let only the seen, let only there be seen, then what will happen? You will not be reckoned by it. You will not be impacted by it, or you will not be affected by it, and then you will not be in it, because what happens is that we identify with all those seeing, hearing, or thinking. It means you will not be in it, and you will not be either here or there or between the two, and that is the end of suffering. This is out of my reach. So the last one is completely out of my reach. But I didn't mention it without mentioning, and Buddha also, it's there in the sutta. Sir, anything you want to add here?
See, this sutta has been a great challenge for people, and those who suggest systematic training, that has been, because this sutta directly talks only of you. And if you remember the story we had read in one of the verses, you remember Bhaya's Darujuga, there was a story which we had read as one of the Dhammapada verses. He belonged to some other tradition, doing some other meditation, some other thing.
He came back next time.
We had read it about that story. So he had no background of this kind of a meditation and anything. Yet by just transforming the view, he could become enlightened because of his, maybe he had a power of concentration or something like that. The whole idea is that view is changed. When in the process of seeing, seer is not there. Normally, this is what happens, isn't it? I am seeing, I am hearing, because I is always there, and associated with that I is the likes and dislikes arise, because the moment I am seeing, then either I will like it or dislike it. The moment I am hearing, I'll either like it, dislike it, or say, or ignore it. ऐसा ही है, neutral, कुछ नहीं है, कोई मजा नहीं आया. या तो वायलेंस की फिल्म हो या लव की फिल्म हो, कुछ भी नहीं हो रहा तो क्या मजा क्या है उसमें, गई गुजरी फिल्म. So that kind of a, we want this Trayoka of things, and everything we get, the moment I is there, the evaluation starts in that manner. If there is only seeing, as Buddha must have seen that this person is will be able to do that, then obviously there is no you. You is not, neither you are attached to the process of seeing, nor you are attached to the object which you see. That's why he says, neither you will be here nor will be there. Here meaning in the seer nor as the seen. Nor will get attached to there, nor you will get attached to the seer. Then the I is evaporated. There is no I in the true process of seeing. Now, this is, of course, in this way, when you look at it, it sounds very esoteric. Yeah. But I think it's not such an esoteric thing. When you are deeply engaged in any activity, very, very deeply engaged in any activity, then the I is no longer working. Then only the intellect is working in some certain particular way. The I starts working the moment you realize गलती हो गई, ठीक नहीं हो पा रहा, या बहुत अच्छा कर दिया, बहुत जल्दी कर दिया, I am such a wonderful person. Then I arises. In the doing of a thing, usually, if it is done very proficiently, the I usually vanishes, because then only the most of the great artists, great players, if you see their lives, you'll see that when a great artist is doing a work of art or a great player is playing, there's no notion of I. There's just the playing going on, that's it. So this is a well-recognized fact, even in our mundane life, of people who really have developed that ability to focus on the task at hand and not worry about the consequences of the task, or what it will do to me. So in that way, you can get a semblance of it. Of course, for Bahia was a person with deep concentration, he could cut through the small barrier which was operating in his psyche of notion of I. So we can see that if the notion of I is completely dispelled with, as I was mentioning earlier, then one is completely free. You are neither here nor there, which meaning not seer nor the seen. You don't identify with anything. And similarly with respect to any of the senses. And if there is no I, there is no suffering. That's why the people say no I, no suffering. Because suffering has its root in I. One of the Zen masters said to her, he made that statement. What is the essence of Buddha's teaching? He said, no I, no suffering. One can understand that.
I think in this broadly introduces very interesting way to represent two ways we look at it, the two views we look at each. And he says that if we look at what he's calling a horizontal universe, it's about what happens in our mind which thinks. In the mind, you will always the past thoughts. The past is in the mind. The past is not a reality. Only when we start to think about the past, it becomes a reality in the present. So, and the future is also not a reality. It's just a planning happening in the mind. The past, present, and future are what he's calling is the horizontal universe. It's not the timeline. It's the view with which we live. The moment we are thinking of past, present, future, and strategies and all that, that is horizontal. Not the timeline, not the physical time that happened last moment, this moment. And in the view where we are not thinking of the past, present, and future and all those differentiations, they're just there. We are in the now, as this is. That's the vertical universe. And he says that each universe has its own set of laws. The horizontal universe operates on the principle of time, pleasure, pain, and sense of self. Sense of self is the domain of the horizontal universe because it feels the pain by remembering past incidences. It fears of something going wrong in the future and plans for acquiring pleasure in the future. So it operates on time. And we love to be distracted because if we are quite within ourselves, we will have to acknowledge the vertical universe. We have to acknowledge just the presence. There's no sense of self or no time. And that's why the mind always wants to be distracted, always wants to have something related to the horizontal universe as its content. It cannot, it fears going out of the horizontal. It fears not being thinking of past, present, or future. And so some more thoughts on these two different ways of looking. So horizontal has duality, it has past and present. It has a desire, which is pulled towards, and a fear, which is pull away. Both are kind of pulls. We suffer because the state of resistance is the birthplace of individuation. So I think that is, I personally feel that is very crucial thing, which is if you recognize in your mind any state of resistance, you also have recognized a sense of individuation. And that is also a way to be aware whether there is a resistance. And the way out of resistance will lead to suffering. Resistance is suffering. That is the dukkha, that is the background dissatisfactoriness that we always have. It's the core of dukkha.
Desire and fear understood. We suffer because the state of resistance, that is pull, is the birthplace of individuation. Or is individuation the birthplace of pull?
I believe they are the same, one and the same thing. It cannot happen without sense of self.
They're just twins. You can say because of one is has that tenacious hold of individuation. I am. So resistance is a reflection of that. Non-acceptance of reality is one by resistance, isn't it? So we don't like it. So there is somebody who is not liking it. Whatever state of affairs is, and I think in India we have enough to not to like it, enough state of affairs not to like it. So we are all born every time there is a resistance, we are born again. That Pratyachya Samutpada is interpreted as being born again and again and again. So we are born as a complainer against the Manmohan Singh, complainer against this party, complainer against that party, complainer against government, complainer against traffic, and so every moment there is a complaint, there is a feeling of dissatisfaction. Somebody is dissatisfied. So that is a good indicator of the arising of I.
So Suresh saying, what is the state of the mind at intersection point? I think that's where Rodney always says that one should live in the intersection. So it's not that these are because anytime you see them as vertical universe and horizontal universe, you make them as concepts, right? But if you are living in the now, in this present, that is the state of intersection because you are aware. Which is the awareness is part of the vertical universe kind of a concept. You're not lost, which is the horizontal universe. And so, if you are living in the present and still operating at the normal level, that's the point where the author says that one should abide in.
That is traditionally said, living in the world but not of it. They are living in the world but not of it, not caught in it.
So, horizontal has a payoff. These payoffs are something that we really love or attach ourselves to. Those are things that we fear losing when we say that horizontal you abide in vertical, because horizontal gives you an identity, and that identity creates more attachment because an identity can acquire material, status, power, control. Those are all, I think, part of the identity. Identity is an image, and that image creates more content within itself. And when you say I can acquire material wealth and stuff, these are all the mental concepts that we attach to. We feel good when we get all those things because our identity feels good. So those are the payoffs of having a horizontal view. The vertical view denies nothing because what is present can only be present. And you say take reality as is what vertical universe concept is. It denies nothing. It does not perceive from state of individuation, vanity or ego. It sees in totality without priority. So this can be misinterpreted. It sees things as in totality, and it does not put a priority that this is better than the other. I would like this more than the other, because everything is what they are, and everything is equally important and unimportant at the same time. So I think if we look at all the things, all the concepts of vertical, the knot of them could be all horizontal stuff. Anytime we make
opposite,
right? Not means
and Buddha actually says not of horizontal. He doesn't say not of vertical.
Right. So
because not of horizontal is what you see. Horizontal is what you know.
Right.
So saying not of horizontal is much more easier rather than saying not of vertical.
True. And it's like saying, and I think as you said, it's one of the same thing. It's a reflection of each other. Every time we make on one thing more important than the other, that's a horizontal viewpoint. When we see things in plurality and not in plurality, that's a horizontal viewpoint. So I was trying to mention that you can easily see what that these are.
I can see that the time is already now 8:45 there. Deepak is already having a cup of tea and nobody else is having it.
So I was getting sleepy, so I said better to
You brought tea.
tea to wake me up.
We are missing tea.
So I think we should stop. I have one suggestion. Has any one of you read the book Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle?
I have read it, sir, but long back.
Other than you. Akhilesh, have you read?
I have read bit and pieces of it, sir.
अखिलेश ने पढ़ी है क्या?
He's typing something, so
He's not there.
Akhilesh said yes, long back.
So we'll say that to make our discussions even more pointed, I would say that we maybe request all Akhilesh to remember, read that book again and see, point out as you make the presentation where the things intersect with his words, because the words which he uses are different and then they may help us to understand things better. Most of these things are in parallel with what Eckhart Tolle says. So if Akhilesh can do that, read it again, and then he'll become your lead discussant. You are the presenter and he'll be the lead discussant. So point out where does he, then I think it'll become more pointed and we'll have less difficulty, because then another set of words will be there to describe that. And if others can also read it, then it will become more, we'll be in a position to gain much more from it. And also one more comment, a suggestion. There was this point made about the payoff which we get from the horizontal word. Usually we see it as a payoff, isn't it? There's another perspective of looking at it, and that is given in one bhikkhu who wrote a blog, a very beautiful blog, long back. I don't know if I have referred to it earlier in this group or mentioned it. It's called Letters from Mara. Has anybody read it? Okay, I'll locate it and you can see it. We put it on the Google, Letters from Mara. It's very powerful. The Buddha in one of the discourses identifies the 10 soldiers of Mara. So this bhikkhu has put those soldiers in the modern context and written and thought about as if Mara is, as the chief commander of the army, is writing letters to all his soldiers, how to keep the humanity in the trap. So there this playoff is mentioned in a very beautiful manner. I think it will strike you very strongly if you read that. So I'll locate that link and send it to you, then you can share it and read it before we meet next. Then this issue of playoff, because we will see the other side of it very powerfully, how that is a trap in which we get caught, but we usually think of as payoff. So I think we'll call it a day or early morning, because 12:20 here, now it is 8:45
This
here.
is the last slide of this chapter, so maybe we can complete this and then.
Yeah, let's complete that.
So I think taking this separation, which is what he initially said, that to be true is the cause of suffering, and I wanted to emphasize on that. If we question the truth rather than assert it, question the truth does not mean that we take something else as truth. Believe that this is X is causing us pain, and if we conclude that the other concept is the solution, then we have actually made the other one as truth. For example, when we were discussing that, if the sense of self is this, if not, then is it this? Then if you conclude that no, it is not this, but it is this, then you have again concluded something else. What he's saying is that if you just question it, that yes, let me investigate and see whether it's true or not, and then we will rediscover the lost balance between finite and infinite, because finite will lead you to believe things that these are the way things are as worldly things, and infinite will always question this, whether this is true or not. But so if you keep, rather than asserting the truth, just keeping the mind open and questioning them, and you lost.
He doesn't mean asserting the truth of non-separation. He's meaning asserting the truth of separation.
Right. So asserting the truth of separation.
Yeah. Which is apparent. This is not really truth. So the word is not a proper thing. It should have been taking the appearance of separation.
Right. Taking the appearance of separation as truth. So because we believe that this is truth, and and that's the way we live also worldly life. But rather than asserting it, if we question it, then we get that balance back. And this is, I think, comes from the traditions of, Buddhadasa that he was a monk with. The vertical Guinness is the domain of heart. It's not the physical organ or the center of emotions, but it's used in that tradition a lot, the concept of heart, and it's just an abiding awareness. And though sometimes they also use a location for it, the body, but that's just tradition. I think he that's
See,
not.
some traditions, the word chitta is translated as heart. In some traditions, this is also there. The Thai tradition, for example, Ajahn Chah used to translate chitta as heart.
So I think the heart is the abiding awareness, the awareness which is the domain of the heart, and the mind is the domain of the self. We feel separated. The dilemma is he's mentioned that we feel separated, but we are not. And the other 2 points are very important. We can't pretend that we don't feel separated. Because if you make that as a concept, then no, we feel separated, but we are not. So let's assume that we are not separated. That's another concept. So you were saying something?
I was saying that most Advaita scholars get into this second mode.
Yeah.
At least the ones I have known, they would say there is no separation. Why are you bothered about? And the very next moment they will ask the employee of his company to get lost and why he is demanding more salary, even if it is genuine and genuine. So he will do all kinds of break all Shilas and say we are not separated. Why are you bothered about it? So that pretension to separate, that we are not separated does not work. So something has to be done. You can't say therefore nothing should be done. But what should be done is very crucial.
I think doing nothing is not the answer. And what the dilemma is that this doing happens from sense of self. Always happens from sense of self. Doing always makes the problem real, which is start to assert it that yes, this is the problem that I don't feel, I feel separated, and you made it real, and strategically, and this strategy separates us from the problem. So I think rather than asserting the problem, if one starts to question it, get into the vertical universe, as if you assert the problem and strategize the solution out of it, then you are horizontal.
Good. I think I will put one question for Rajesh to think about over the week. What does it mean to say that we are not separated? We are obviously separated. मैं यहाँ 5000 किलोमीटर दूर बैठा हूँ, तुम वहाँ बैठे और वो लोग 20,000 किलोमीटर दूर बैठे हैं.
Then I think
We're going to think about it.
you want me to think over a week, or what do I think now?
Do meditation and
Please reply now, or if you want to give a more considered reply, you are welcome.
So I can reply from what my understanding is as of now.
Very good.
So I think there is a sense of self, which is what we have created, and that is the only concept of separation, because we believe that there is this I, which is different from this has a body which is different from the rest of the environment, and it is different from other people. And when you do not have, when you are in awareness, you kind of lose the sense of I, and at that time the separations don't seem to be as strong or as truth as it would have otherwise.
Good. I think that's a good reply. But I think we should need to reflect upon it very deeply. It's very, and of course we have been in some sense discussing it in various ways. I think that would be a good starting point for next time. We start from
The last time also we discussed this where we felt that scientifically also we can see that
scientifically from the various perspectives of science and atoms and molecules and oxygen and so on.
Yeah.
But what does it mean really? We feel separated, that is obvious. But it says, but we are not. So in what sense we are not, and in what sense we are? Why do we have that feeling? Why do we have that feeling is obvious. We are sitting at three corners of the world, east, west, and middle. So it seems obviously we are separated. But then how do we say we are not? In what sense do we say we are not? Of course, probably the next chapter is interconnectedness. क्या है next chapter?
yes, sir. By view of interconnect.
So this I think will automatically. Then it is good. So when you take the next chapter, then please answer this question. Okay. So thank you. I think we'll expect Akhilesh to. अखिलेश ने कुछ नो लिखा हुआ है, वो क्या लिखा है भाई?
सर वो आपने पूछा था कुछ whether we have read it or not.
फिर नो कैसे क्यों कर दिया? पहले तो उसने कहा था yes I have read, then long back, then he said sure sir, then he said I understand, then he says no.
No for the letter of Mara. Right.
अच्छा ठीक है. तो दीपक ने लेटर ऑफ मारा भी ढूंढ दिए भैया. I mean, whenever I have read it, I have really relished it. So beautifully written. आप लोग पढ़ के देखिएगा. It'll be a good reading for 45 minutes लगेंगे. It's a long one. All the 10 soldiers is put in terms of, anthropomorphize them as human beings and बहुत ही बढ़िया लिखा है. But the message it sends is very powerful. So जिसको हम payoff कहते हैं, then it seems like a bait rather than a payoff. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Namaste.